One of the things that many Chinese people fail to understand is that the words China is a developing country actually means something. This is actually a status within the WTO, an official status that gives certain advantages to certain countries. Chinese people repeat these words over and over and over because they've been told to. But what they don't understand is how unfair these accusations can be. Chinese people will go out of their way to tell you how advanced the technology is here and that America wants to steal 5G, even though America announced it first, and so did Korea. But anytime something negative happens, you will hear the same excuse every single time. Chinese people will stop you and say, well, China is a developing country. These words have always been interesting to me. Developing. How is it that a country with such amazing technology could still be a developing country? So I decided to actually go and look it up and see if someone could actually define, without a doubt, what it means to be a developing country. And here's what I found. One of the things I read is that it seemed really silly to me was that on Wikipedia, it says that the United Nations, well, accepts any country that claims to be developing. To me, this isn't right. Does this mean that I could just run out in the street and just kick someone and say, well, I apologize, I'm still developing my manners, That doesn't sound right to me. So again, is China actually developing, or is this just an excuse every single time China gets caught doing something negative? So I decided to investigate a little more, to do a little bit more reading. And it says that developing countries tend to have some characteristics in common. Well, okay, that makes sense. If you want to determine if China is developing, then you should compare it to some countries that we know for sure are developing. You have to have a benchmark, right? So that's what I did. I compared them to less developed countries. Low levels of access to safe drinking water. China doesn't really have that issue. I doubt if you go around asking Chinese people, I'm sure, without a doubt, they're going to tell you that they have plenty of drinking water. So China's not developing in that way. Chinese people have drinking water, right? What about energy poverty? It says that energy poverty is another way that you can tell. I've never had the lights go out here, but I live in Guangzhou, right? It's a tier 1 city. Safe to say that they're going to keep the lights on here, right? So I've never had this issue where I come home and the lights are out, or the lights are out for 2 hours or something. It's never happened here. So again, in Guangzhou, I don't think it's an issue, right? I don't think that's a problem here. Pollution. Well, I think this is an issue. Pollution seems to be getting a little better, I think, or at least I thought so. A few weeks ago, it was pretty good. Now it's just okay, right? And then a few days ago, it was pretty bad. So I think that pollution, not just in the air, but in rivers and things like that, to me, is that developing though? I don't know if that indicates developing. What about road traffic? Yeah, China probably has an insane death rate in regards of driving. I'm sure it does, right? Not that those numbers were ever reported, but here people are really crazy. Like they just run into the street, they get hit by buses, and it's really strange because people here drive really aggressively. Do I think that means that they're developing? Not necessarily. Because what about low education? Don't Chinese people claim to be insanely smart? Good math, science. To me, that one's interesting because one of the things of a developing country is, of course, low education. But Chinese people are some of the smartest in the world, right? So in my opinion, is China a developing country by those standards? Well, no. I think people here have access to education. People here have access to technology. And if you have access to education and technology, why are there still issues of pollution? Why are there still issues of the way people drive? Quite obviously, there are other reasons for that. You see, I think there are major differences between a developing of infrastructure and a difference in trade and technology. While there may be issues of pollution here, is that really an excuse for other issues? How come China's issue with intellectual property is considered, well, a developing country thing? How could a country that prides themselves for pushing out 5G not understand that stealing technology is wrong? I think if Huawei developed some amazing technology and say Mexico stole it, they couldn't just be like, oh, well, sorry, Huawei, we're still developing, and that's just not how it is, right? That's not fair. That's not what it means to be developing. Developing status is given to countries in an effort to help them improve the lives of people, not as an excuse to steal from the rest of the world. How could China have the largest overall GDP in the world and still be developing? How could China have the third largest military in the world but still be developing? Quite obviously, it isn't, right? The truth is that developing status isn't an excuse. So of course, why doesn't China just dump this developing country status? I mean, after all, face is huge here in China. And who wants to be looked down on as, oh, you're a developing country? I don't think that's something that Chinese people would like. But of course, there are advantages to being considered a developing country by the WTO. This enables China the ability to set subsidies and agricultural, to set barriers to market entry for more developed economies. It makes it easier for them to, have an advantage of trade with countries like America and Canada and Britain and Australia, France and Germany. All of these countries that, say they're developed. So Commerce Ministry spokesman Gao Feng said in a press conference that China would stand by its position, that we do not shy away from our international responsibilities and are willing to assume obligations within the WTO that are compatible with our own economic development level and capabilities. He says, in fact, we do the same and will continue to do this. At the same time, we will work with other developing members to firmly uphold our fundamental rights to voice our common voice and safeguard our development interests. Sounds like they really want to keep that unfair advantage of having, this within the WTO. This developing status is apparently something they want to keep. It gives them a large advantage, obviously. I think it's just fairly obvious that the WTO rules go too far in allowing China to subsidize its industries and support state-owned firms, and to be honest, just discriminate against foreign investors. The terms have helped foster problems such as forced transfer of technology and theft of intellectual property, and they've never really been checked because they've been allowed to keep developing country status this entire time. Even when you look at the list of countries that are on the developing list, it kind of makes you question, why is China on this list? Is China really on the same level as Afghanistan? Is China really on the same level as Bangladesh? Is China really on the same level as Cambodia? Or how about Gambia, or Guinea, or Haiti, or Yemen, or Zambia? I think if you showed these pictures of these countries to Chinese people and said, hey, you guys are the same, you're both developing, I think Chinese people would be offended. I think they would call you a racist. I think that they would shut you down very quickly. I think they would argue with you. So is China still developing? Well, it claims to be. And of course, the WTO is not going to force them to change that status. I mean, it's already developed in many ways, far more than many of the rest of the world many times. But honestly, it holds on to this development status for trade purposes and nothing more. If China really wants to be a world leader, it would have to act like one. And in return, it will be treated like one. And one of the first steps that China can do is renounce its developing status within the WTO. Prime in China, like, comment, subscribe.